All right, today we're jumping into this incredible, mind-bending puzzle from the ancient world. And trust me, this isn't just some dusty old story. It's a logical workout that's going to make us ask some really big questions about reality itself.
So let me ask you this. Imagine you're in charge of a really important sacred ritual, and a key piece of it just vanishes, gone. So you do the responsible thing, right? You make a replacement. But then, and you knew this was coming, the original one suddenly shows up again. What do you even do? Now you've got an extra piece. Is it holy? Is it just junk? This, right here, is the heart of the whole problem we're talking about today.
Okay, so to get this, we have to go back in time. We're in the ancient temple in Jerusalem. And we're talking about a specific kind of offering called a mincha. It's a meal offering. It's made from a super precise amount of fine flour. You gotta understand this isn't just a bag of flour. It's a single, sanctified thing that has to be handled perfectly.
All right, so here's how this whole mess unfolds, step by step. First, the priest takes this offering and splits it into two perfect halves. Simple enough. But then, step two, disaster strikes. One of those halves gets lost. Poof, gone. So step three, the priest, thinking it's gone for good, prepares a brand new, identical half to take its place. And then, step four, of course, the original lost half is found. So now you're standing there looking at three half offerings when you only need two. What on earth do you do?
Okay, so let's get our cast of characters straight, because this is where the debate really kicks off. We've got three main players on the stage. First, there's the first half, the OG, the one that never went anywhere. Then you've got the lost half, the one that just made its dramatic reappearance. And finally, the replacement half, the understudy that was called up to the big leagues. Three pieces, but only one offering. You can see why this is a problem.
So, the first great thinker to try and solve this puzzle is the sage Rava, and his approach is super precise, almost like a detective. He has this theory based on direct, historical connections. He calls it the rule of pairs. Okay, so Rava's logic works like this. He says contamination, or ritual impurity, can only spread between two halves that were officially a pair at some point. Think of it like a chain of custody. So if the lost half becomes impure, it contaminates the first half because they were the original pair. But the replacement half? Nope, it's totally fine because it was never paired with the lost one. And it works the other way too. If the replacement half gets contaminated, it only affects its partner, the first half. The lost one is safe.
So the key takeaway from Rava's whole system is that the first half is basically the central hub connecting everything. Since it was paired with the lost half at one point and with the replacement half at another, if the first half becomes impure, then bam, it contaminates both of the others. It's the one link they share. It's a very neat, very linear way of looking at it. But just when you think that's all settled, another brilliant sage, Abaye, steps in and basically says, "Hold on a second, Rava. You're looking at the trees, but you're missing the whole forest." Abaye comes at this with a completely different, much more holistic perspective. And Abba uses this amazing metaphor to explain his idea. He says of the three halves, they are all residents of one cabin. What he means is that they all come from the same source, they all share a single sacred purpose. They were all created to fulfill the very same offering. So for Abaye, their individual little histories don't really matter as much as their shared destiny. And this sets up a huge contrast, right? You've got Rava, who says it's all about specific, direct pairings. But then you have Abaye with his one cabin theory, who says if any one of those three halves becomes impure, the whole group is contaminated. They're so deeply connected that what happens to one happens to all of them. It's a really powerful and honestly a pretty elegant idea.
But hold on, the debate is far from over, because now we have to go from this abstract world of ritual purity to the real, physical world of the ritual itself. We're talking about the comets, the handful of flour that actually gets burned on the altar. And this is where theory smacks right into practice. And you can almost hear Abaye's colleagues asking the big question. Okay, Abaye, this one cabin idea sounds nice, but does it actually work in the real world? Can it hold up under these super strict rules of the sacrifice? And this is where Abaye's theory starts to run into some serious trouble.
The first challenge comes from a sage named Rav Papa, and it's basically a math problem. He points out, look, if the priest takes a handful from this mix of all three halevs, then 1/3 of that handful, well, it comes from an extra piece that doesn't even belong in the offering. And the practical consequence of this is huge. See, the handful that's taken is supposed to sanctify the rest of the offering, which the priests would then eat. But if a third of that handful comes from an extra part, it means the handful is diluted. It's not strong enough, not concentrated enough to do its job. The whole integrity of the ritual is on the line.
And if you thought that was bad, an even more devastating blow comes from another sage, Rav Yitzhak. He takes it a step further. He says, forget dilution. How can you even put this handful on the holy altar at all? Part of it, a full third of it, is basically just regular, non-sacred flour. You can't just burn common stuff on the altar. And with that, it really looks like Abaye's beautiful, holistic theory has just hit a complete brick wall.
But just when it looks like it's game over for Abaye's theory, another sage, Rav Ashi, comes onto the scene. And he's got this absolutely brilliant, totally unexpected solution that manages to save the day.
He brings in this incredibly powerful concept, kavanah. It's a Hebrew word that means intention. It's all about the mental focus, the conscious purpose of the person doing the ritual. The idea here is that it's not just about your physical actions, it's about what's going on in your head while you're doing them.
Rav Ashi's argument is so simple, but it's also incredibly profound. He says, look, the physical mixture of the flour doesn't get the final say. The mind of the priest does. The whole thing comes down to the priest's intention in that single moment when he takes the handful. So, check this out. Here's how it works. When the priest reaches in to scoop out that handful, he consciously intends for that handful to be drawn only from the two halves that make up the real, valid offering. His focused kavana, his intention, acts like a mental filter. It separates the sacred flour from the extra flour, even though they're all physically mixed together. This means the handful that actually goes on the altar is 100% holy, 100% valid. And just like that, Rav Ashi saves Abaye's one-cabin theory from all those practical problems. So we end up here. This ancient, seemingly obscure legal case leaves us with this huge, totally modern question. How much of our world is defined not by what things physically are, but by what we intend them to be? From a sacred offering in an ancient temple all the way to our lives today, it makes you wonder, what if the most powerful tool we have for shaping our reality is our own mind?